She was a young bride, given to an older duke. What happened on their wedding night changed them both. The bells of Halewick Cathedral tolled with solemn gravity across the frost-bitten valley, their sombre rhythm echoing like a dirge rather than a celebration. Within those ancient stone walls, 19-year-old Leora Merrin stood trembling, her slender fingers clutching a bouquet of white lilies that seemed to weep dewdrops upon her gloves. The candlelight caught the golden-brown strands of her hair beneath the veil, rendering her almost ethereal, a sacrificial offering rather than a bride. "Remember your duty," her father had whispered, before escorting her down the aisle. Lord Merrin's once proud face now bore the hollow devastation of financial ruin, his desperate eyes imploring her compliance. "The Veramond name shall restore what we have lost." And so she walked, step by measured step, toward the man who would become her husband, Duke Thalan Veramond, whose reputation preceded him like a shadow at dusk. At 47 years, he stood tall and imposing at the altar, silver threading through his dark hair, his countenance carved from marble and memory. The whispers said he had loved once, fiercely, until flame and tragedy stole wife and child, leaving behind a man entombed in his own silence. "I present to you, your grace, my daughter." Lord Merrin's voice cracked, betraying the transaction disguised as tradition. The Duke inclined his head, storm-grey eyes sweeping over Leora with dispassionate assessment. "Miss Merrin," he acknowledged, his tone deep yet distant, as though speaking across a chasm of years rather than mere inches. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. No music swelled, no tears of joy were shed. The witnesses, grim-faced solicitors and distant relations, observed with the detached interest of vultures circling fate. Leora's responses emerged as whispers, each "I will" and "I do" falling from her lips like stones into still water. When Thalan Veramond slid the gold band onto her finger, his touch was impersonal, gloved. She dared not look into his face, focusing instead on the intricate pattern of his waistcoat, the perfect folds of his cravat. The man was a fortress, his walls impenetrable. "The contract is sealed," intoned the vicar, closing his prayer book with finality. "What God has joined together." Outside, rain began to fall as they emerged, droplets sliding like tears down the leaded windows. The Duke's carriage awaited, black and gleaming, horses stamping impatiently against the cobblestones. He handed her in with proper courtesy, yet there remained no warmth in the gesture. "To Ironhall," he instructed the driver, settling opposite his new bride without meeting her gaze. The carriage lurched forward into gathering dusk, the rhythmic clatter of hooves marking each mile that drew Leora further from all she had known. Villages passed, then woodlands, then the wide expanse of the Veramond estate, thousands of acres of prosperity built upon generations of noble blood. "Your new home approaches, Duchess," the Duke remarked, after an eternity of silence. Leora peered through rain-streaked windows to glimpse Ironhall rising from the mist, grey stone towers crowned with gargoyles, windows glinting like wary eyes. The ancient seat of Veramond power loomed vast and forbidding against darkening skies. "It is magnificent, your grace," she managed, her voice small. Something shifted in his expression, perhaps surprise at her response, perhaps merely acknowledgement. "It has stood for 4 centuries. It will outlast us all." The carriage halted before grand oak doors, where servants waited in strict formation despite the deluge. Leora was ushered inside, water dripping from her hem onto marble floors, polished to mirror brightness. Footsteps echoed throughout the cavernous entrance hall, portraits of stern-faced ancestors observing her arrival with painted disapproval. "Mrs. Holloway will show you to your chambers," the Duke announced, removing neither coat nor gloves. "You will wish to rest before dinner." "Yes, your grace." She curtsied, propriety her only refuge. An elderly housekeeper appeared, keys jingling at her waist like prison wardens' chains. "This way, your grace." She beckoned to Leora, the new title sitting awkwardly upon her young shoulders. As she followed, ascending a grand staircase toward the unknown, Leora felt the weight of her new husband's gaze upon her back. She turned, finding him watching her ascent with an unreadable expression, perhaps contemplating the bargain he had struck, the youth he had purchased, the duty that awaited with nightfall. The household seemed to hold its breath, waiting. When Mrs. Holloway opened the door to the Duchess's chambers, Leora stepped across yet another threshold, her heart hammering against her ribs. The door closed behind her with the soft, inevitable click of a cage being locked. Night was falling rapidly, shadows lengthening across fine furnishings and silken hangings. From the window, she could see fog rolling across the grounds, swallowing gardens and statuary alike, obscuring all paths of return. In mere hours, he would come to claim what was now rightfully his. The knock, when it finally came, sounded like thunder against the silence. The knock resonated through Leora's chambers with authoritative precision, 3 measured raps that seemed to echo her rapid heartbeat. She rose from where she had been sitting motionless at her dressing table, the ivory-handled brush untouched beside her. Her lady's maid had departed an hour prior, having unpinned her hair and helped her into a nightgown of finest lawn, embroidered with forget-me-nots. A bitter irony, for Leora doubted she would remember this night with anything but dread. "Enter," she called, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. The heavy oak door swung inward, revealing Duke Thalen Veramund silhouetted against the corridor's wavering lamplight. He stepped inside with measured grace, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sealed their privacy. Unlike at their wedding, he was now divested of his formal attire, though still formidably dressed in a burgundy smoking jacket over an immaculate white shirt, his cravat loosened but not removed. His eyes, those storm-grey harbingers, swept the chamber before settling upon her. "I trust you find your accommodations satisfactory, Duchess." "Yes, Your Grace. They are most generous." Leora clasped her trembling hands before her, willing strength into fingers that threatened to betray her fear. "Ironhall has many rooms, yet few that welcome comfort," he remarked, moving toward the hearth where flames danced with feverish intensity against the chill of stone walls. This suite was renovated when last the house entertained hope. The oblique reference to his first marriage hung between them, unacknowledged yet impossible to ignore. Leora remained standing, uncertain whether to approach or retreat, feeling every inch the interloper in this chamber haunted by another woman's ghost. The Duke removed his gloves with deliberate slowness, one finger at a time, as though each movement carried ceremonial significance. His hands, when revealed, surprised her, not the soft, pampered extremities of idle nobility, but strong, capable hands marked by faint scars that spoke of experiences beyond drawing rooms and council chambers. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, driving rain against the glass in percussive sheets. Leora startled at the sound, a small involuntary shudder passing through her slender frame. "You're cold," the Duke observed, his tone neither accusatory nor concerned, merely factual. "A momentary chill, nothing more," she responded, though her arms remained wrapped protectively around herself. He crossed to an armoire and opened it, extracting a shawl of midnight blue, its borders adorned with delicate silver embroidery. Without warning or ceremony, he approached and draped it gently across her shoulders, his movements precise yet oddly tentative, as though handling a fragile artifact rather than a wife. "My late mother's," he explained, stepping back immediately once the task was complete. "She found these rooms draughty, particularly when east winds prevail." The unexpected gesture rendered Leora momentarily speechless. The shawl carried both warmth and the faint scent of lavender water, its weight across her shoulders oddly comforting. "Thank you, Your Grace." Thalen Veramund moved to the window, gazing outward into night and tempest. His profile, illuminated by flashes of distant lightning, revealed features carved by time and hardened by experience. Handsome still, but in the austere manner of a weathered cliff face. "When I was a boy," he began unexpectedly, his voice pitched low, "there was a theory that storms on wedding nights foretold a marriage of passion and tumult." Leora clutched the shawl more tightly. "And do you subscribe to such superstitions, Your Grace?" A ghost of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps bitterness, passed across his countenance. "I have found, Duchess, that life requires no superstition to deliver its storms." He turned from the window, regarding her with an expression she could not decipher. The silence stretched between them, alive with unspoken expectations and unvoiced fears. "Perhaps you would care for tea," he suggested finally, indicating a silver service that had materialized on a side table during her earlier preparations. "The hour grows late, but heightened nerves often benefit from simple comforts." Astonished by this unexpected civility, Leora nodded. "That would be welcome." He gestured toward 2 chairs positioned before the fire. She moved to take one, perching upon its edge like a bird poised for flight. With surprising domesticity, the Duke himself poured the steaming amber liquid into delicate porcelain cups, adding a precise measure of cream to one before handing it to her. "You remember my preference," she observed, unable to mask her surprise. I observe, Duchess. It is a habit formed through necessity rather than virtue. He settled into the opposite chair, firelight casting dramatic shadows across his features. Your father mentioned your fondness for poetry during our negotiations. A particular volume was included among your belongings. Wordsworth, I believe. Leora's fingers tightened around her teacup. Yes, his verses have been a comfort since my mother's passing. Something shifted in the Duke's expression, a fractional softening around eyes that had witnessed too much sorrow. Then we share at least one commonality, however slight. Literature offers sanctuary when reality proves intolerable. For the first time since their introduction months ago, Leora looked directly into her husband's face, searching for the cruelty or lust she had anticipated. Instead, she found only carefully controlled solitude, the practiced isolation of a man who had walled himself away from feeling. "My lord," she began hesitantly, setting aside her teacup, "may I speak plainly?" His eyebrow arched slightly. "I would expect nothing less from my Duchess." She swallowed, gathering courage like scattered pearls. "I understand my duty to you and to your house. I will not shrink from what must be." The Duke raised his hand, the gesture halting her words with gentle authority. "What must be, as you phrase it, need not be tonight, nor any night until mutual inclination suggests otherwise." Leora stared, certain she had misheard. "But the contract specifies matrimony, which has been legally accomplished." He set down his own cup with deliberate care. "It does not dictate the private hours of our association." A clock somewhere in the vast house struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through stone and silence. The Duke rose from his chair with fluid grace, moving toward the door. "Rest well, Duchess," he said, his hand upon the latch. "Tomorrow we shall begin the business of acquaintance, which seems a more civilized approach than forced intimacy. Wouldn't you agree?" Before she could formulate a response, he added softly, "The shawl is yours now. May it provide whatever comfort this house has yet failed to offer." The door closed behind him with gentle finality, leaving Leora alone with the crackling fire and her tumultuous thoughts. She remained motionless, the blue shawl wrapped around her shoulders like a shield, its unexpected gift of choice warming her more thoroughly than its fibers ever could. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within her chambers, something dangerous had taken root, the first fragile tendril of hope. On the bedside table, a single volume rested, her Wordsworth open to a page she had not selected, a line underscored with the faintest pencil mark, the best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. Morning arrived with hesitant sunlight filtering through parted drapes, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden shafts across the Duchess's chambers. Leora woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings, until memory reasserted itself. The wedding, Ironhall, the Duke's unexpected withdrawal. The midnight blue shawl remained draped across her shoulders, its gentle weight a tangible reminder that the previous night's events had not been merely a peculiar dream. A discreet knock preceded the entrance of her lady's maid, a solemn-faced girl named Agnes, who curtsied with practiced precision. "Good morning, Your Grace. I've brought your breakfast tray." "Thank you, Agnes." Leora sat up, smoothing her tangled hair with one hand. "What is the hour?" "9:30, Your Grace. His Grace has been abroad since dawn, attending to estate matters." The maid busied herself opening curtains fully, allowing weak April sunlight to flood the chamber. "Mrs. Holloway asked me to inform you that His Grace requests the pleasure of your company for luncheon at 1 o'clock in the small dining room." Leora nodded, accepting the tray of toast preserves and fragrant tea. Such formality for a husband who might have claimed every intimacy yet had chosen distance. "Agnes, how long have you served at Ironhall?" The girl paused in her task of selecting a day dress from the wardrobe. 3 years, Your Grace." "Then you served the household before—" Leora hesitated, uncertain how to reference the tragedy that hung like an invisible pall over the great house. "Before the fire, yes, Your Grace." Agnes's voice dropped to near whisper, "though I was but a scullery maid then, not fit to serve the Duchess personally." "And the Duke? Was he always so—" Leora searched for an appropriate descriptor, finding none that encompassed the complex man she had glimpsed the previous night. "Reserved?" Agnes supplied, her eyes downcast. "No, Your Grace. Once there was laughter in these halls. Music, too. The old Duchess played the pianoforte most beautifully, and the young master would sing." Her face clouded with remembered sorrow. "After the fire, His Grace spoke only when necessary. The music room has remained locked these 5 years past." This small confidence painted a picture vastly different from the cold, calculating aristocrat Leora had been led to expect. She sipped her tea thoughtfully, wondering what manner of man lay beneath the Duke's carefully maintained facade. Once dressed in a modest gown of lilac muslin, Leora ventured from her chambers, determined to explore her new domain. Ironhall revealed itself as a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each more imposing than the last. Ancestral portraits lined the gallery, generations of Veramon nobility regarding her with painted suspicion. Servants appeared and disappeared like silent spectres, bowing or curtsying as she passed, their expressions betraying equal measures of curiosity and assessment. Eventually, her wanderings brought her to the Grand Library, a two-storied temple to knowledge, with leather-bound volumes lining walls that stretched toward an ornately plastered ceiling. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating reading tables and comfortable chairs arranged in contemplative solitude. "The finest private collection in 3 counties," came a voice from behind her. Leora turned to find an elderly gentleman regarding her with kindly eyes behind spectacles. He bowed with careful dignity. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. I am Mr. Pembroke, the Duke's librarian these 30 years past." "No forgiveness necessary, Mr. Pembroke. I am merely exploring my new home." She smiled, grateful for interaction untainted by servile formality. "I must confess, I have never seen so many books assembled in one place." His Grace's grandfather was the true collector, though the current Duke has added significantly to our historical and scientific volumes. The librarian gestured toward a reading desk where several books lay open. "He spends many hours here, particularly during the darker months." Leora approached the desk, curious about what might engage her husband's intellectual interests. The open volumes revealed treatises on agricultural improvement, alongside architectural drawings for what appeared to be workers' cottages. "His Grace concerns himself with such matters personally?" she asked, surprised. Mr. Pembroke nodded. "Most assiduously, especially since—" He paused, then continued with careful neutrality. "The Duke believes proper housing and sustainable farming practices benefit both tenants and estate. Not all of his peers share such progressive views." Another piece of the puzzle that was Thalen Veramon slid into place, a nobleman concerned with those beneath his station, contradicting the rumors of cold indifference that had accompanied her introduction to him. "I see," she murmured, tracing her finger lightly across a detailed drawing. "Thank you for this insight, Mr. Pembroke." The librarian bowed again. "Should Your Grace wish recommendations for reading, I remain at your service." Left alone among the books, Leora continued her exploration, eventually discovering a small alcove containing volumes of poetry. There, nestled among more prestigious works, she found a well-worn copy of the very Wordsworth collection she treasured. Opening it, she discovered marginal notes in a firm, masculine hand, thoughtful observations, and occasional questions that revealed a mind engaged in active dialogue with the poet's sentiments. She was still there, absorbed in these written glimpses into her husband's inner thoughts, when the library door opened. The Duke himself entered, still dressed in riding clothes, a ledger tucked beneath his arm. He halted upon seeing her, surprise momentarily displacing his customary reserve. "Duchess," he acknowledged, bowing slightly. "I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you, Your Grace." Leora closed the book, feeling strangely as though she had been caught trespassing in territories more intimate than physical chambers. His gaze fell to the volume in her hands, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Ah, you've found my old companion." He approached, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "Those marginalia were written in more impetuous days. I hope you'll forgive their presumption." "On the contrary," Leora replied, summoning courage, "I found them insightful, particularly your observations on Tintern Abbey, the notion that nature's truest gift is perspective rather than mere beauty." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps even pleasure, quickly masked by practiced composure. "You've read it closely." "Poetry has been my refuge and my education," she admitted. "My father considered it frivolous, but my mother encouraged the habit. It was the one indulgence he permitted after her passing." The Duke moved to a nearby window, gazing outward at gardens beginning to emerge from winter's grip. "My first wife shared your appreciation for verse. She would recite from memory while working at her embroidery." His voice carried no inflection, yet Leora sensed the controlled pain beneath its measured cadence. "I cannot imagine your loss," she said softly. "Nor would I presume to replace what fire took from you." He turned, regarding her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "Why did you agree to this marriage, Duchess?" The truth, if you please, not what propriety dictates. The direct question caught her unprepared. Leora took a steadying breath. My father's circumstances left little choice. The alternative was my cousin's household, a man known for cruelty, disguised as discipline. Her fingers tightened around the book. Between uncertain kindness and certain malice, the decision was not difficult. Uncertain kindness, he repeated, the phrase seeming to surprise him. An apt description of what I can offer, I suppose. A clock chimed the quarter hour, breaking the moment's fragile intimacy. The Duke straightened, resuming his more formal demeanor. Luncheon awaits in the small dining room. Might I escort you, Duchess? She replaced the poetry volume and accepted his proffered arm, the first physical contact between them since their wedding ceremony. Through layers of clothing, she could feel the solid strength of him, neither yielding nor demanding, simply present. They walked in silence through corridors now bathed in midday light, the great house seeming less forbidding with each passing hour. At the dining room entrance, the Duke paused, his expression thoughtful. Tonight, if you are amenable, perhaps we might continue our literary discussion. The evening hours often stretch endlessly in the country. I would welcome that, Your Grace, Leora replied truthfully. Something almost resembling a smile touched the corner of his mouth, brief as lightning yet equally illuminating. Until then, Duchess. As a footman opened the door, revealing a table set for two beside windows overlooking spring's first blossoms, Leora realized that the cold transaction of their marriage was evolving into something undefined yet potentially profound, a partnership built not upon physical claim but mutual recognition. Outside, a gardener was carefully uncovering rose bushes, long protected against winter's assault. Within, two strangers bound by law and circumstance took their places at a shared table, the space between them charged with unspoken possibility. From a distant corridor came the sound of a door being unlocked, the music room perhaps, opening after years of silence. Afternoon light slanted through Ironhall's windows as Leora followed Mrs. Holloway through the west wing, each footstep echoing against marble floors worn smooth by generations of Veramund nobility. 3 days had passed since her arrival, 3 days of cautious exploration and tentative exchanges with the Duke over meals and evening readings. His Grace wished you to see this chamber, though it has remained sealed these many years, the housekeeper explained, producing an ornate key from the ring at her waist. She hesitated before the carved double doors, her weathered face betraying unusual emotion. It was the late Duchess's sanctuary. The lock turned with reluctant protest, dust motes dancing in the disturbed air as the doors swung inward. Leora stepped across the threshold into a room frozen in time, the music room Agnes had mentioned, preserved like an insect in amber. A magnificent pianoforte dominated the space, its mahogany surface gleaming beneath a protective cloth now drawn back. Sheet music remained positioned as though awaiting a performer's return. Nearby stood a child's violin upon a miniature stand, a collection of simple exercises open before it. Her Grace taught the young master himself, Mrs. Holloway whispered, remaining near the doorway, as though reluctant to intrude upon hallowed ground. The Duke would sometimes accompany them on the cello. Those evenings, her voice trailed off, the memory evidently too painful to articulate. Leora moved slowly around the chamber, absorbing details that spoke of abruptly halted happiness, a shawl draped over a chair, a half-finished piece of needlework in a basket, a child's drawing pinned to a corkboard. The preserved domesticity struck her with unexpected force, illuminating the magnitude of what her husband had lost. "Why has he opened it now?" she asked softly. The housekeeper straightened, resuming her professional demeanor. "It is not my place to speculate upon His Grace's motivations. However," she paused, choosing her words with careful precision, "change has come to Ironhall with your arrival, Your Grace. Perhaps some ghosts may finally be permitted rest." Alone in the music room after the housekeeper's departure, Leora approached the pianoforte with reverence. Her own modest musical education had been among the few refinements her father considered essential for securing an advantageous match. Hesitantly, she pressed a single key, its note hanging in the air like a question mark, slightly out of tune after years of silence, yet retaining a resonant beauty. She favored Chopin, though Mozart made frequent appearances for the boy's lessons. Leora turned to find the Duke standing in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted against the corridor light. Unlike his usual impeccable appearance, he seemed somewhat disheveled, as though summoned mid-task by the sound. "Forgive me," she said quickly, withdrawing her hand from the instrument. "I meant no disrespect. None is taken." He entered the room, his movements measured, yet lacking their customary fluid grace. "Instruments are made for playing, not reverence. 5 years of silence serves neither music nor memory." He approached the pianoforte, running his fingers lightly along its polished edge. This was commissioned for her 30th birthday. Italian craftsmanship, the tone uniquely suited to her touch. His voice remained controlled, yet Leora detected the undercurrent of pain beneath its calm surface. "You must have loved her very much," she observed quietly. The Duke's expression remained impassive, though something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of ancient grief carefully contained. Georgiana was the light of this household. Her laugh could dispel the gloomiest winter day. He paused, his gaze distant. "James, our son, inherited her disposition, sunshine personified." Leora stood motionless, afraid that any movement might shatter this unprecedented glimpse into her husband's guarded heart. "Would you tell me of them?" she asked gently, not to intrude upon sacred memory but to understand. For a moment she feared she had overstepped. The Duke's shoulders tensed, his jaw tightening with suppressed emotion. Then, to her surprise, he gestured toward a small settee positioned near the window. "What would you know, Duchess?" They sat, a proper distance maintained between them, as afternoon sunlight bathed the room in amber radiance. For the first time, Thalen Veramond spoke of his first marriage, a love match unusual among their station, formed during a London season when he, a serious young heir, had been captivated by the spirited daughter of a scholarly viscount. She played at their townhouse during a musical evening, Bach's Prelude in C major, nothing technically impressive, yet performed with such joy that the notes seemed newly composed. A faint smile touched his lips, quickly fading. "We were married within the month, scandalizing society with our haste." "And your son?" Leora prompted when he fell silent. "James arrived after 2 years of marriage, a robust child with his mother's musical aptitude and my unfortunate stubborn streak." The Duke's hand moved unconsciously to his waistcoat pocket, where Leora had noticed he often carried a small object. He would have been 12 this coming autumn. The enormity of loss hung in the air between them. Leora sensed they had reached the limits of what her husband could bear to discuss, yet rather than retreat into silence, he continued, his voice dropping to near whisper. "The fire began in the East Wing late evening. A lamp overturned by a careless housemaid. A girl barely 16 later found drowned in the lake from guilt." His face remained composed through iron discipline. Georgiana had gone to check on James, who had developed a mild fever. They were trapped before the alarm could be raised. "And you?" The question escaped before Leora could contain it. The Duke's hand moved to the faint scar at his temple. "I attempted entry through the nursery window. The flames—" He stopped abruptly. "The physicians claimed my recovery miraculous. I have never considered it such." Impulsively, Leora reached across the distance between them, her fingers lightly touching his sleeve. To survive is not betrayal, though it may feel so. He glanced at her hand, then met her gaze with unexpected directness. "You speak as one familiar with survivor's guilt, Duchess. My mother's consumption claimed her slowly, while I remained healthy at her bedside." Leora withdrew her hand, folding it in her lap. "I have often wondered why Providence spared the daughter yet took the mother." A moment of recognition passed between them, the shared territory of inexplicable loss. The Duke rose, moving to the window where late afternoon sun illuminated his profile with golden light. When he spoke again, his tone had regained its customary restraint. "I have instructed the staff to prepare this room for your use, should you wish it. The instrument requires tuning, of course, but that can be arranged." The unexpected gesture left Leora momentarily speechless. "Your Grace, I could not possibly—" "Duchess," he interrupted gently. "Dead rooms serve neither the living nor departed. If music might once again fill these chambers, perhaps—" He did not complete the thought, yet its meaning hung between them, the possibility that healing might finally begin. A discreet knock preceded the butler's entrance, his dignified countenance carefully neutral. "Pardon the interruption, Your Grace, but Lady Dunsley has arrived unexpectedly and awaits in the blue drawing-room." The Duke's expression instantly hardened, his momentary openness vanishing behind the mask of aristocratic reserve. "Inform Lady Dunsley I shall attend her shortly." As the butler withdrew, Leora noticed her husband's palpable tension. "Lady Dunsley is a relation?" she inquired. "Georgiana's cousin," he replied tersely, "and a frequent visitor since my bereavement, ostensibly to maintain family connections, though her motives have grown increasingly transparent with time." Understanding dawned. This Lady Dunsley had perhaps harboured ambitions regarding the widowed Duke, ambitions now thwarted by Leora's presence. The realization brought unexpected discomfort, a strange territorial sentiment she had no right to claim. The Duke offered his arm with formal correctness. "Shall we greet our unexpected guest, Duchess? I believe it time the household acknowledged its new mistress." Leora accepted, her hand resting lightly upon his sleeve as they proceeded toward the confrontation awaiting them. In that moment, she understood that the afternoon's intimacy had forged something unforeseen between them, not romance, perhaps, but alliance. Whatever Lady Dunsley represented had unified them in unexpected solidarity. The blue drawing-room door loomed before them, beyond which waited the first test of their nascent partnership. The Duke paused, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Remember, Duchess, this house is now yours to command, whatever prior claims others may believe they possess." He opened the door, and together they stepped across yet another threshold. Lady Dunsley rose as they entered, her taffeta gown rustling with deliberate prominence. She was a woman of perhaps 35, her beauty carefully preserved through artifice and determination, her dark hair arranged in elaborate curls beneath a fashionable bonnet. Her smile, directed exclusively toward the Duke, displayed perfect teeth and absolutely no warmth. "Thalen, dearest cousin," she exclaimed, extending gloved hands while pointedly ignoring Leora. "How positively medieval of you to sequester yourself without announcement. Society has been abuzz with rumors." The Duke received her greeting with rigid courtesy, maintaining a careful distance that required her to lower her outstretched hands. "Caroline, your visit is unexpected. Spontaneity has always been my particular charm." Her laugh tinkled like glass shards, though perhaps I should have written ahead given your changed circumstances. Only then did her gaze slide toward Leora, assessing her with the calculating precision of a merchant valuing questionable goods. "So this is your bride. Allow me to present Her Grace the Duchess of Veramond," the Duke stated formally, his tone brooking no disrespect. "Duchess, Lady Caroline Dunsley, my late wife's cousin." Leora executed a perfect curtsy, years of deportment lessons serving her well in this moment of barely veiled hostility. "Lady Dunsley, how delightful to make your acquaintance." "Charmed, I'm sure." The older woman's smile remained fixed, her eyes cold. "What an unexpected elevation for the daughter of Lord Merrin. Why, I believe I last saw you at Lady Hartwell's musicale. You performed a rather simple Clementi piece, did you not? Such modest accomplishments." The Duke stiffened beside her, but Leora spoke before he could intervene. "Indeed, though I find Clementi's apparent simplicity masks considerable technical demands, much like social discourse, seemingly straightforward until one attempts its proper execution." She maintained a pleasant expression throughout, her pointed response delivered with perfect composure. A flicker of surprise crossed Lady Dunsley's features before she recovered her disdainful poise. She turned back to the Duke. "Thalen, I've brought those pamphlets regarding the memorial garden we discussed for Georgiana and James. Perhaps we might review them privately. Anything concerning Erenhall or the Veramond legacy may certainly be discussed before the Duchess," he replied with finality, guiding Leora to a seat beside him on the settee, leaving Lady Dunsley to occupy a chair opposite them. The arrangement, physical and symbolic, was not lost on their visitor, whose complexion acquired an unbecoming flush. "How companionable you've become, Thalen. Quite a transformation from the solitary grief you've cultivated these 5 years." "Marriage often brings unexpected changes, Lady Dunsley," Leora observed mildly. "Though I understand such transformations might be disconcerting for those accustomed to previous arrangements." The tension in the room crystallized, sharp enough to draw blood. Lady Dunsley's fingers tightened around her reticule until her knuckles whitened. "How fortunate that your new Duchess possesses such spirit, Thalen, though perhaps unexpected in one whose family circumstances necessitated such a pragmatic match." The Duke's expression darkened dangerously. "You forget yourself, Caroline." "Do I?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice to intimate levels. "Or do I merely remember what others seem determined to forget? Georgiana's memory deserves better than hasty replacement with a merchant's daughter, however prettily packaged." Leora felt the Duke's body tense beside her, coiled like a spring. Impulsively, she placed her hand atop his, a gentle pressure intended to calm. To her surprise, he did not withdraw from the contact. "Lady Dunsley," Leora began, her voice steady despite the painful barb, "no one could replace your cousin or her beloved son. Their memory remains honoured at Ironhall as it should. She met the woman's hostile gaze directly. But surely even grief must eventually yield to life's continuation, lest we build nothing but monuments to what cannot be recovered. A charged silence followed her words. Lady Dunsley's eyes narrowed, calculating her next attack, when the Duke suddenly spoke, his tone holding unexpected gentleness. "The memorial garden will proceed as planned, Caroline. We shall break ground when autumn comes." He reached into his waistcoat pocket, removing a small object Leora had sometimes seen him touch. A tarnished silver pocket watch. This was to be James's on his 12th birthday. "It shall be buried beneath the cornerstone, along with Georgiana's favourite volume of sonnets." The raw emotion in his voice silenced even Lady Dunsley's venom. She stared at the timepiece, her composure momentarily fracturing to reveal genuine grief beneath her jealous machinations. She would have approved, she admitted reluctantly. Georgiana always preferred living gardens to Coldstone. The conversation shifted to practical details regarding the memorial, hostility gradually yielding to civil, if strained, discussion. Throughout, the Duke's hand remained beneath Leora's, their fingers eventually intertwining in unconscious solidarity. When tea was served, he poured for his wife first, a subtle domestic gesture that spoke volumes about shifting alliances. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Lady Dunsley finally rose to depart, her initial offensive blunted if not entirely abandoned. At the drawing-room door, she paused, regarding Leora with reluctant reassessment. "You play the pianoforte, I believe. Perhaps on my next visit you might demonstrate whether your capabilities have improved." "I should be delighted," Leora responded with unruffled dignity, "though I understand the Verimund instrument stands unrivaled in 3 counties. Even modest talents might be elevated by its superior tone." Lady Dunsley's lips compressed into a thin line, recognizing the implication that Leora knew of the music room's reopening, a privilege never extended during Caroline's many visits. With a final brittle smile and extravagant farewell to the Duke, she swept from the chamber, trailing expensive perfume and thwarted aspirations. Once her carriage had departed down the long gravel drive, the Duke turned to Leora, his expression inscrutable. "You acquitted yourself admirably, Duchess." "One needn't be born to nobility to recognize a challenge to one's territory," Leora replied, attempting lightness despite her racing pulse. Only now did she fully comprehend the precarious position she occupied, interloper in a house still haunted by its former mistress, whose memory others wielded as weapon against her. The Duke's gaze lingered on her face, as though seeing her anew. "Caroline has long harboured illusions regarding her place at Ironhall, even before—" He stopped abruptly, then continued with careful precision. "Even during Georgiana's lifetime, her cousin's ambitions were transparent. She loved your wife yet coveted her position," Leora observed. "A complex sentiment, and not entirely unsympathetic. You defend her?" Surprise coloured his tone. "I understand her," Leora clarified, "which is not the same as excusing her deliberate cruelty." An unexpected half-smile touched the Duke's lips. "You possess remarkable perception, Duchess. Necessity teaches observation to those without power," she replied simply. "When one's circumstances depend entirely upon others' decisions, one learns to read what remains unspoken." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, of perspectives his privileged position had never required him to consider. The afternoon's confrontation had revealed aspects of his new wife previously concealed beneath quiet compliance, courage, quick wit, and dignity that owed nothing to rank or fortune. "Would you walk with me?" he asked suddenly. The gardens, though still awakening from winter slumber, offer pleasant sanctuary after social combat. The unexpected invitation, their first truly private excursion, caused Leora's heart to quicken. "I should like that very much, Your Grace." He offered his arm, and together they strolled into the spring afternoon, departing through French doors that opened onto a stone terrace overlooking formal gardens, now receiving their first seasonal attention from a small army of gardeners. "Georgiana designed these parterres," the Duke explained as they descended shallow steps to gravel paths. "She had extraordinary vision for how patterns would develop once plantings matured, that he could speak his first wife's name without constraint, could share her accomplishments without painful hesitation, seemed significant progress from the guarded man who had claimed Leora at the altar. They walked in comfortable silence, the Duke occasionally indicating particular specimens of horticultural interest, Leora responding with genuine appreciation for the estate's natural beauty. As they rounded a hedge of dormant roses awaiting summer's invitation to bloom, they encountered an elderly gardener carefully pruning the canes. He straightened with difficulty upon noticing the Duke, touching his cap respectfully. "Good day, Your Grace." His rheumy eyes shifted curiously to Leora. "And to you, young mistress." "Hodges has tended Ironhall's gardens for 43 years, the Duke informed her. "His knowledge of rose cultivation remains unrivaled in the county." The old man ducked his head, pleased yet embarrassed by the praise. "Just doing what needs doing, same as always. These beauties will bloom come June, God willing." He gestured toward the dormant bushes with gnarled, soil-stained hands. "The white ones were the young master's favorites. Used to help me water them, he did, though more water found his boots than the roots, if truth be told." The unguarded reminiscence, offered without the painful formality that characterized most servants' carefully neutral references to the lost child, visibly affected the Duke. For an instant, his composed facade faltered, revealing raw grief beneath. Leora stepped forward instinctively, drawing attention to herself. "Perhaps you might advise me, Mr. Hodges. I know little of gardening, but would learn if you'd be willing to instruct." The old gardener's weathered face creased with genuine smile. "Be an honor, Your Grace. Every lady of Ironhall should know her roses. It's tradition-like." As they continued their walk, leaving the gardener to his pruning, the Duke remained silent, his expression distant. When they reached a small ornamental lake, he finally spoke. "You were kind to him. He clearly loved your son," Leora replied simply. "Such affection deserves acknowledgement, not avoidance." The Duke studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Most who enter Ironhall tread cautiously around any mention of what was lost, as though grief might prove contagious." His voice carried no accusation, merely observation. "You move differently among these shadows. Perhaps because I bring no expectations of replacing what came before," she offered quietly. "I seek only to find my own place here, whatever that might become." As they stood beside the still water reflecting budding trees and clear sky, something indefinable shifted between them. Not passion, not yet even friendship, but a recognition of potential companionship where before had existed only contractual obligation. The Duke withdrew a letter from his pocket, its seal already broken. "This arrived this morning from your father. I had intended to deliver it privately, but perhaps now is appropriate." Leora accepted the missive with sudden apprehension. Lord Merrin's correspondence rarely brought pleasant tidings. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the single sheet, scanning its contents with growing distress. "He wishes to visit," she said finally, looking up to find the Duke watching her reaction closely. "Next week with my cousin Bartholomew? That appears to displease you," he observed. "May I inquire why?" Leora carefully refolded the letter, buying moments to compose her response. "My father's interest in my welfare has historically coincided with his interest in financial advantage. As for cousin Bartholomew," she hesitated, reluctant to speak ill of family. "The alternative you mentioned," the Duke prompted, recalling their previous conversation. "The man known for cruelty disguised as discipline." She nodded once sharply. "He believed himself the logical recipient of my hand. My father's arrangement with you disappointed his expectations." Understanding darkened the Duke's countenance, and now they arrived together at Ironhall uninvited. "Forgive me," Leora whispered, shame coloring her cheeks. "I never imagined they would intrude upon your household." To her surprise, the Duke's expression softened with something resembling protectiveness. "They intrude upon our household, Duchess, and shall be received accordingly." The simple pronouncement, "our household," affected Leora more profoundly than any flowery declaration might have done. For the first time since entering Ironhall as a stranger, she felt the stirrings of belonging, of shared territory worthy of defense. The Duke extended his hand, not his arm, in unprecedented informality. "Shall we return? The evening grows chill, and I believe we have an appointment with Wordsworth before dinner." Leora placed her fingers against his palm, the contact both tentative and significant. As their hands clasped, a solitary swan glided across the lake's mirrored surface, leaving ripples that expanded in ever-widening circles, like the consequences of choices made on a wedding night, continuing to transform all they touched. "Yes," she replied, "let us go home." The arrival of Lord Merrin's carriage a week later cast a pall over Ironhall's newly established tranquility. Leora stood beside the Duke in the entrance hall, her posture outwardly composed, while inwardly she battled a lifetime of ingrained deference to her father's volatile temperament. The blue shawl, now a familiar comfort, was draped about her shoulders despite the mild spring day, armor of sorts against the coming confrontation. "Remember," the Duke murmured for her ears alone, "you are Duchess of Veramon now. This house and all within it stand at your command." She glanced at him, surprised by both the sentiment and the protective undercurrent in his tone. During the past week, their cautious companionship had evolved through shared meals, evening readings, and occasional walks through awakening gardens. Though physical intimacy remained unbroached, a different sort of closeness had begun to develop, an alliance of minds that found unexpected pleasure in each other's company. Before she could respond, the great doors swung open to admit Lord Merrin and his nephew. Her father entered first, thinner than she remembered, his once imposing figure diminished by financial anxiety, though his expression retained its habitual calculation. Behind him loomed Bartholomew Merrin, a corpulent man of 30, whose small eyes darted greedily about the entrance hall, assessing its wealth with naked avarice. "Father," Leora greeted with appropriate curtsy, "Cousin Bartholomew, welcome to Ironhall." Lord Merrin barely acknowledged his daughter, his attention fixed entirely upon the Duke. "Your Grace, most grateful for your hospitality. The journey was taxing, but worth every discomfort to witness my daughter's fortunate establishment." Lord Merrin. The Duke's acknowledgement was coolly formal, offering neither the warmth of family connection nor the enthusiasm of financial benefactor. "Refreshments await in the blue drawing room. Perhaps you wish to rest before dinner." "Nonsense," Bartholomew interjected with forced joviality. "Family requires no ceremony. We've come to see how our little Leora fares in her exalted position." His gaze slid over her in a manner that caused the Duke's posture to stiffen imperceptibly. Marriage appears to agree with her, though one wonders at the arrangement's particulars. An uncomfortable silence followed this impertinent insinuation. The Duke's expression remained impassive, though Leora sensed his carefully controlled anger. Before matters could deteriorate further, she intervened with practiced social grace. "The blue drawing room offers a pleasant prospect of the East Gardens, Father. I believe you'll appreciate the landscape design, quite remarkable for this season." She moved toward the corridor, subtly directing the uncomfortable party away from the entrance hall's public exposure. Once settled with tea and refreshments, Lord Merrin wasted little time in revealing his purpose. "Your Grace, I've brought certain documents requiring attention, mere formalities regarding Leora's dowry payments. I was under the impression all financial matters were conclusively settled before the marriage," the Duke replied evenly, though his gaze sharpened with suspicion. Lord Merrin produced papers from his coat with practiced nonchalance. "Her slight adjustment to the schedule of disbursements. Nothing more. Your man of business approved the preliminary draft. Mr. Winters has made no mention of revised terms," the Duke observed, making no move to accept the proffered documents. An awkward pause ensued, during which Leora observed her father's confidence falter. She had witnessed this pattern throughout her childhood, grandiose schemes crumbling under legitimate scrutiny, followed inevitably by desperate salvage attempts. "Perhaps it slipped his mind," Lord Merrin suggested weakly. "The modifications are trivial, merely advancing the second payment by 6 months to accommodate certain investments requiring immediate capital." The Duke's expression remained unreadable. "I shall discuss the matter with Mr. Winters tomorrow when he calls. Until then, the documents remain unnecessary." Frustration flashed across Lord Merrin's features before social veneer reasserted itself. "Of course, Your Grace. Entirely sensible approach." Bartholomew, less skilled in dissembling, scowled openly. "Seems a simple courtesy to family, considering the bargain you've struck." His gaze flicked dismissively toward Leora. "A Merrin bride merits prompt compensation, particularly one so modestly accomplished." The temperature in the room seemed to drop precipitously. The Duke set down his teacup with deliberate care. "Mr. Merrin, your implication dishonors both your cousin and this household. I suggest you moderate your expressions before further offense necessitates response." Bartholomew flushed puce, but subsided under the aristocrat's glacial stare. Lord Merrin laughed nervously, attempting to salvage the deteriorating situation. "My nephew speaks too plainly, Your Grace. He meant no disrespect to your generosity in accepting our Leora." "I accepted no charity case, Lord Merrin," the Duke replied with dangerous quietude. "I chose a wife whose qualities become increasingly evident with each passing day." The unexpected declaration stunned Leora as thoroughly as it silenced her relatives. The Duke had never before articulated any personal motivation for their marriage beyond contractual arrangement. That he would defend her thus, attributing choice where necessity had dictated terms, created a warm expansion beneath her ribs that defied rational explanation. Lord Merrin recovered first, his calculating gaze moving between his daughter and her husband with newfound speculation. Indeed, how gratifying to hear. Leora's modest virtues were perhaps underappreciated within our household. Perhaps, the Duke agreed with cutting precision, a failure of observation rather than absence of merit. The remainder of the afternoon proceeded with strained civility, Lord Merrin attempting repeatedly to steer conversation toward financial matters, while the Duke deflected with aristocratic aplomb. Bartholomew consumed excessive refreshments and made thinly veiled disparaging remarks about Leora's new position, each met with increasingly frigid responses from her husband. When the gentleman retired to the library for brandy, social convention preventing Leora's inclusion, she retreated to the music room, seeking solace among its peaceful shadows. The pianoforte had been tuned as promised, and she settled before it gratefully, allowing her fingers to drift across keys that responded with mellow resonance to her touch. She began with simple exercises, then progressed to a Beethoven sonata she had practiced in secret during her father's frequent absences from their modest estate. Music had always provided sanctuary when words failed, a private language in which she could express sentiments forbidden in her circumscribed existence. So absorbed was she in the composition that she failed to notice the door opening or the figure that paused upon the threshold, arrested by unexpected harmony where silence had reigned for years. "Clementi indeed," came the Duke's voice, startling her into stillness. "Lady Dunsley's assessment appears increasingly inaccurate." Leora turned on the bench, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "Forgive me, I didn't hear you enter, nor should apology accompany such artistry." He remained by the doorway, posture slightly less formal than his usual rigid stance. "Beethoven suits this instrument particularly well. Georgiana preferred Chopin, but always acknowledged the German's superior architectural complexity." The casual comparison, offered without painful hesitation or morbid reverence, represented significant evolution in their relationship. Leora smiled tentatively. "Have our guests retired?" A shadow crossed his features. "Your father has taken temporary refuge in correspondence. Your cousin, having consumed the better part of a decanter, sleeps undignifiedly in the library." He stepped further into the room, approaching the pianoforte with measured tread. "I find myself requiring musical remedy for their society. I can withdraw if you wish solitude," she offered, preparing to rise. "Stay." The single word held unexpected urgency, then moderated as he continued. "That is, I would welcome your continuation, if not inconvenient." Leora resumed her position at the keyboard, conscious of his tall figure now standing beside the instrument, his profile illuminated by late afternoon sunlight. She began again, the sonata's contemplative passages flowing with greater confidence beneath his undemanding observation. "Your father attempted to negotiate additional advances against your dowry," the Duke remarked during a natural pause between movements. "When rebuffed, he suggested that perhaps marital happiness might incline me toward generosity." Her fingers faltered momentarily before continuing. "I suspected as much. His investments rarely prosper as projected." "You are not surprised by his presumption?" "I have never been more than ledger entry in my father's calculations," she replied without self-pity, simply stating facts long accepted. "My value lay in potential alliance, not filial sentiment." The Duke's hand came to rest upon the pianoforte's polished surface, his signet ring catching afternoon light. "And your cousin's obvious resentment." Leora's rhythm maintained its steadiness, though her voice quieted. "Bartholomew expected to receive both my person and my modest inheritance through arrangement with my father. Your offer superseded his claim, a circumstance he considers personal affront rather than fortunate escape." "For you," the Duke clarified, studying her downcast profile. "Not for himself." "Indeed," she acknowledged with the ghost of a smile, "though he imagines himself the injured party." A moment of silence stretched between them, broken only by the sonata's delicate arpeggios. When the Duke spoke again, his voice carried an edge she had not previously heard. "They shall remain exactly 3 days, as dictated by minimal courtesy. During that time you need never be alone with either gentleman." His hand moved fractionally closer to where hers continued its dance across ivory keys. "This house is your sanctuary now, Duchess. None within it shall cause you distress, while I draw breath." The quiet vehemence of this declaration affected Leora more profoundly than any passionate avowal might have done, that he would defend her against her own blood, would establish boundaries where previously she had possessed none. This represented care beyond contractual obligation. "Thank you," she whispered, the sonata reaching its gentle conclusion beneath her fingertips. The final notes hung in the air between them, gradually fading into companionable silence. Outside, shadows lengthened across formal gardens as afternoon yielded to evening's approach. Within the music room, two people bound by circumstance and contract found themselves drawing incrementally closer through unexpected alliance. The Duke moved toward the door, then paused, half turning toward her. "Dinner shall be served at 7, perhaps?" He hesitated, then continued with careful deliberation. "Perhaps afterward, weather permitting, we might walk in the gardens. The night-blooming jasmine near the conservatory has begun its seasonal display." "I should like that very much," Leora replied, her voice steadier than her pulse. He nodded once, a gesture conveying both acknowledgement and something less defined, anticipation, perhaps, of hours yet to unfold. "Until then, Duchess." As the door closed behind him, Leora remained at the instrument, her fingers lightly tracing keys that had facilitated this latest evolution in their cautious dance. Above the pianoforte hung a portrait she had not previously noticed, a small, unobtrusive painting, partially concealed by drapery. Drawing back the fabric, she discovered the likeness of a woman with kind eyes and an intelligent smile, seated at this very instrument with a dark-haired child beside her, Georgiana and James, preserved in happiness before tragedy intervened. Curiously, their painted presence brought no jealousy or discomfort. Instead, Leora experienced a strange sense of continuity, as though the music room's reopening had somehow incorporated her into a narrative temporarily suspended, but not concluded. "I shall care for him," she whispered to the portrait, an unplanned vow formed in unexpected empathy. Not as replacement, but as continuation. The fading sunlight caught the gold of her wedding band, a circle unbroken, like the cycle of seasons now bringing spring back to Ironhall's gardens after long winter dormancy. Outside her sanctuary, voices echoed down distant corridors, her father's obsequious tones, Bartholomew's petulant complaints. They represented a past from which she had been unexpectedly liberated through marriage, initially accepted as mere alternative confinement. Within 3 days they would depart, leaving her to continue the unfolding discovery of her place within Ironhall's walls, and perhaps within its master's guarded heart. Rising from the pianoforte bench, Leora straightened her shoulders with newfound determination. Tonight she would walk with her husband beneath spring stars, their steps illuminated by fragrant jasmine. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges from unwelcome guests, challenges she would face not as powerless daughter, but as mistress of a great estate, her position defended by the very man who had once seemed her jailer. The clock in the hallway struck 6, its resonant chimes measuring hours now filled with unanticipated possibility. Leora touched the blue shawl still draped about her shoulders, no longer merely garment, but symbol of unexpected protection freely given. Then she went to prepare for dinner, and for whatever might follow beneath the night-blooming jasmine. Dawn mist clung to Ironhall's gardens as Leora stood at her chamber window, watching servants prepare the carriage that would, mercifully, bear her father and cousin away. 3 days of their presence had proven a peculiar crucible, transforming her relationship with the Duke in ways neither could have anticipated. Lord Merrin had persisted in financial manipulations with increasing desperation, while Bartholomew alternated between sullen resentment and inappropriate familiarity whenever the Duke was absent. Through it all, Thaylen Veramund had maintained impeccable composure, rebuffing their schemes with aristocratic finality, while ensuring Leora remained protected from their more direct impositions. Last evening had witnessed the final confrontation. Dinner concluded, the gentlemen had withdrawn to the library where Lord Merrin, emboldened by wine, had presented an entirely new document, a codicil supposedly requiring additional settlement should the marriage prove barren after 1 year. He produced this fiction with impressive solemnity, the Duke had recounted afterward during their now customary evening walk. As though legitimate contracts include fertility provisions enforceable upon established noble houses, my father's desperation grows, Leora had replied sadly. His creditors must be pressing with unusual vigor. The Duke's expression had softened momentarily. You feel compassion, despite his treatment of you. He remains my father, however flawed. She had gazed up at stars emerging above Ironhall's ancient walls, though I confess relief at their imminent departure. Now watching preparations for that very departure, Leora felt a complex mixture of emotions. residual loyalty warring with newfound independence, familial obligation yielding to nascent partnership with the man she now called husband in more than mere legal designation. A discreet knock preceded Agnes's entrance with breakfast tray. "Good morning, Your Grace. His Grace requests your presence in the study before your father's departure, if convenient." "Thank you, Agnes." Leora accepted a cup of fragrant tea, warming her hands against its porcelain curve. "Has Mr. Winters arrived?" "Indeed, Your Grace. He awaits with His Grace in the study." The maid hesitated, then added with unusual candor, "The household breathes easier knowing your relations depart today. Mr. Bartholomew's behavior below stairs has been most troubling." Leora's cup paused midway to her lips. "What has occurred?" Agnes colored slightly. "Nothing warranting Your Grace's concern. Merely liberties attempted with younger maids, firmly rebuffed by Mrs. Holloway's intervention." Familiar shame warmed Leora's cheeks. Her cousin's proclivities had evidently followed him to Ironhall, staining her new household with old embarrassments. "Please convey my apologies to the staff. Such conduct reflects no tolerance from the Duke or myself." "No apologies necessary, Your Grace." Agnes smiled with genuine warmth. "The staff holds Your Grace in high regard. None would associate you with your cousin's impropriety." This simple statement, evidence of acceptance within her new domain, affected Leora profoundly. In mere weeks, she had transitioned from powerless daughter to respected mistress of a great estate, a position acknowledged not through mere title but earned regard. After dressing in a morning gown of pale green muslin, Leora made her way to the Duke's study, a handsome chamber lined with ledgers and estate maps where serious business occurred beyond society's performative rituals. She found her husband seated behind a massive oak desk, while Mr. Winters, his solicitor, occupied a leather chair opposite, papers spread between them. "Ah, Duchess." The Duke rose immediately upon her entrance, a courtesy he never neglected, despite their increased familiarity. "Thank you for joining us. Mr. Winters has prepared documents requiring your attention." The solicitor, a serious gentleman of middle years with shrewd eyes and methodical demeanor, stood with formal bow. "Your Grace, a pleasure to see you looking so well established at Ironhall." "Mr. Winters," Leora acknowledged with appropriate nod. "What documents require my consideration?" The Duke gestured toward an empty chair. "Please, be seated. The matter concerns your personal security." Mystified, Leora obeyed, arranging her skirts as Mr. Winters extracted several official-looking papers bearing impressive seals. "Having observed Lord Merrin's conduct these past days," the Duke explained without preamble, "I have instructed Mr. Winters to establish a separate trust in your name, independent of both your dowry and the Verrimond family accounts." Leora stared, uncomprehending. "A trust? For what purpose?" "Financial independence, Duchess." The Duke's expression remained serious. "The sum is modest by noble standards, but substantial enough to provide security should circumstances ever necessitate. Separation from my protection." The implication stunned her into momentary silence. He was offering what no husband of their acquaintance would consider financial means for his wife to exist without him, should such need arise. "This settlement," Mr. Winters elaborated, "places £30,000 under your Grace's sole authority, requiring no masculine countersignature for access or disbursement. Most irregular but legally sound, given His Grace's insistence." "Why?" The question escaped before propriety could contain it. The Duke's gaze met hers directly. "Because no person under my care shall ever feel trapped by financial dependency, as you were beneath your father's roof." A shadow crossed his features. "Some cages are gilded, but remain cages nonetheless. Ironhall shall never be such for you." The profound implications of this statement, its recognition of female vulnerability and deliberate countermeasure against potential future subjugation, demonstrated understanding beyond Leora's expectations. That he would voluntarily relinquish financial control, the traditional husband's ultimate authority, suggested respect transcending conventional marriage. "These require your signature," Mr. Winters indicated, pushing documents forward with accompanying pen. Leora's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the writing instrument. "This generosity exceeds all reasonable expectation, Your Grace." "Not generosity, Duchess," he corrected quietly. "Justice." She signed where indicated, the scratching of quill against parchment oddly momentous in the study's morning stillness. When completed, Mr. Winters applied various official seals, and tucked the documents into his portfolio with evident satisfaction. All properly executed. The funds transfer immediately to accounts under your Grace's control. He rose, preparing to depart. Copies shall be filed with appropriate authorities by week's end. The Duke nodded approval. Excellent. Now, regarding Lord Merrin's proposed codicil, entirely without merit or legal standing, the solicitor confirmed, with professional disdain. I have prepared a formal rejection for your signature, citing specific statutes rendering such claims void. Perfect. Leave it for my attention once the Duchess and I have concluded our business. When Mr. Winters had departed with discreet bow, Leora turned toward her husband, emotion constricting her throat. I lack adequate words to express. None are required, he interrupted gently. The arrangement merely formalizes what should exist in any equitable marriage. Mutual respect through balanced power. He paused, then added with unexpected candor, I have witnessed how constrained choices breed resentment, even within privileged circles. Whatever develops between us, Duchess, it shall not be tainted by coercion, financial or otherwise. The statement's implication, that something beyond mere contractual arrangement might indeed develop, caused warmth to bloom beneath Leora's breastbone. Before she could respond, however, a commotion from the entrance hall interrupted their exchange. Raised voices, one recognizably Bartholomew's, echoing with petulant demand. The Duke's expression hardened. It appears your relations prepare for departure with characteristic grace. I should bid them farewell, Leora responded, rising with reluctance. Together, I think. He offered his arm with formal courtesy that nonetheless conveyed alliance. They entered the entrance hall to find Bartholomew engaged in heated dispute with the butler regarding portmanteau placement, while Lord Merrin hovered nearby, his expression oscillating between embarrassment and calculation. Ah, Leora, her father brightened upon noticing them. Come to bid your dear family adieu. Most natural sentiment. Father, she acknowledged with appropriate curtsy. Cousin Bartholomew, I trust your visit proved satisfactory. Bartholomew abandoned his argument with the long-suffering butler, turning sullen attention toward her. Hardly. 3 days observing what might have rightfully been mine, both estate and bride, scarcely constitutes satisfaction. Mr. Merrin, the Duke interjected, his tone arctic, you tread dangerously close to insult. Lord Merrin laughed nervously. My nephew speaks in jest, of course. We've been most appreciative of your Grace's hospitality. He moved closer to Leora, lowering his voice to urgent whisper. A private word before departure, daughter. Before she could respond, the Duke's hand covered hers where it rested upon his arm, a subtle yet unmistakable gesture of support. The Duchess's schedule remains quite full this morning, Lord Merrin. Any message may surely be delivered in present company. Frustration flashed across her father's features, quickly suppressed beneath social veneer. Merely paternal sentiments, Your Grace. A father's concern for his only child's welfare. A concern notably absent until financial advantage beckoned, the Duke observed with devastating precision. Silence descended, broken only by Bartholomew's indignant spluttering. Lord Merrin paled, then recovered with practiced obsequiousness. Your Grace mistakes familial devotion for mercenary interest. Most unfortunate misinterpretation. Indeed, the Duke replied without inflection. Almost as unfortunate as presenting fraudulent financial documents to a peer of the realm, a matter Mr. Winters shall address through appropriate legal channels should further impositions occur. The warning, delivered with aristocratic composure, yet unmistakable intent, drained remaining colour from Lord Merrin's countenance. He glanced between his daughter and the Duke, suddenly comprehending the unified front they presented, no longer separate entities to be manipulated in isolation, but allied forces beyond his familiar strategies. We shall trouble you no further, Your Grace, he managed stiffly. Leora, that is, her Grace, appears well established. Our concerns are alleviated. How gratifying, the Duke responded with cool civility. Your carriage awaits. The farewell that followed observed every social nicety while conveying absolute finality. No invitations for future visits were extended, no promises of correspondence exchanged. When the carriage finally departed down Ironhall's long drive, disappearing into morning mist, Leora felt no conventional daughterly regret, only profound relief and strange lightness, as though invisible bonds had finally snapped. They will not return, the Duke stated with quiet certainty beside her. No, she agreed softly. That chapter concludes today. They remained on the threshold a moment longer, watching spring sunshine gradually burning away morning vapors to reveal gardens awakening with new life. Behind them, Ironhall's great doors stood open, no longer representing confinement, but protection freely offered and consciously accepted. "Mr. Hodges mentioned the first rosebuds appear on the south terrace," the Duke remarked, his tone lightening. "Perhaps you might inspect them before luncheon. I understand he awaits your opinion regarding certain pruning techniques." The invitation, casual yet attentive to her expressed interests, demonstrated how thoroughly he had begun observing her preferences, incorporating them into shared routine. "I should enjoy that very much," she replied with genuine warmth. As they turned back toward the entrance hall, Leora realized that what had begun as transaction, young bride given to older duke through financial arrangement, had somehow transformed into nascent partnership founded upon unexpected mutual respect. The wedding night that had changed them both continued its quiet revolution through everyday choices and accumulated understanding. Not passion, not yet, but something perhaps more enduring, recognition of separate personhood within shared endeavor. Spring sunshine streamed through Ironhall's tall windows, illuminating ancient stone and new possibilities with equal radiance. Summer arrived at Ironhall with lavish generosity, transforming formal gardens into riotous color and filling long evenings with golden light that lingered until nearly 10 o'clock. 3 months had passed since Leora's arrival as reluctant bride, her position evolving from uncertain interloper to comfortable inhabitant through gradual, nearly imperceptible shifts in daily routine. The Duke, once distant figure of aristocratic reserve, had likewise undergone subtle transformation, his rigid formality softening into something less guarded, more accessible. They had established comfortable rhythms, breakfast taken together in the morning room overlooking the East Gardens, separate pursuits during daylight hours, shared walks before dinner, evenings spent in the library or music room, reading aloud or playing duets as their musical partnership developed. Physical intimacy remained unconsummated by mutual unspoken agreement, though increasing comfort with casual contact, his hand beneath her elbow, her fingers briefly touching his sleeve, suggested evolving possibilities rather than permanent restraint. They occupied separate chambers still, the Duke making no demands beyond companionship freely given. On this particular morning, Leora sat at her dressing table while Agnes arranged her hair in loose curls rather than formal coiffure, more suitable for the informal day ahead. The household buzzed with unusual activity, for today marked Ironhall's traditional midsummer festival, an ancient custom where estate workers and tenants gathered for celebration in the great meadow beyond the formal gardens. "The staff says it's the first such gathering since—" Agnes hesitated, still careful when referencing the tragedy that had marked Ironhall's recent history. "Since the fire," Leora completed gently. "Has the tradition been long established?" "Oh yes, Your Grace. Centuries old, they say." The maid secured a final curl with practiced efficiency. His late Grace, the Duke's father, maintained it faithfully, and his Grace continued until 5 years passed. The decision to revive this tradition had emerged gradually over recent weeks, not from Leora's suggestion, but through the Duke's own initiative, accompanied by careful observation of her response. That he would voluntarily reopen this channel to community interaction, would choose celebration over continued isolation, represented significant evolution from the withdrawn widower who had greeted her upon arrival. A knock at the adjoining door preceded the Duke's entrance, a recently established morning custom requiring neither formal announcement nor third-party chaperonage. He appeared already dressed for the day's activities in country attire, more relaxed than his usual formal wear, though still impeccably tailored to his tall frame. "Good morning, Duchess." His greeting carried warmth absent during their early encounters. "I trust you slept well?" "Exceedingly, thank you." Leora smiled at his reflection in the mirror as Agnes discreetly withdrew. "The household seems quite animated this morning." "Indeed. Mrs. Holloway reports the kitchens have been operational since 4 o'clock. He moved to the window, gazing outward at preparations visible in the distance. "The tenants appreciate these traditions, though I confess finding them somewhat hollow in recent years." The admission, casual reference to his grief-induced withdrawal, demonstrated growing comfort in acknowledging his past without painful constraint. Leora joined him at the window, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "And now?" she inquired gently. He considered her question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Now they seem Appropriate again, a necessary reconnection between house and community. His gaze shifted from the distant meadow to her face. Your presence has facilitated much restoration, Duchess, more than you perhaps realize. The quiet acknowledgement of her influence, her role in Ironhall's gradual reawakening, warmed Leora more profoundly than any passionate declaration might have done. Before she could respond, however, the Duke continued with careful deliberation. "I have something for you." He withdrew a small leather case from his pocket, offering it with uncharacteristic hesitancy. A tradition of sorts, though long neglected. Mystified, Leora accepted the case, opening it to reveal a delicate necklace of sapphires set in silver filigree, clearly an heirloom piece of considerable antiquity and value. She caught her breath, fingers hovering above the jewels without touching them. "The Veramond midsummer gift," the Duke explained, his voice acquiring unusual softness. "Traditionally presented by each Duke to his Duchess on the first summer festival of their marriage." "It's exquisite," she whispered, genuinely moved by both the gift's beauty and its significance as formal acknowledgement of her position. "But surely too valuable for informal country celebration." A ghost of smile touched his lips. "The tradition specifies wearing it beneath ordinary garments, visible only to the wearer and giver, a private symbol amid public festivity." His expression grew momentarily distant. "My mother explained its symbolism when I was quite young, something about hidden value recognized by those who truly see. That he would resurrect this intimate family tradition, would share both heirloom and childhood memory, represented trust beyond their initial contractual arrangement." Leora lifted the necklace from its velvet bed with reverent care. "Would you—" She turned, presenting her back in implicit request for his assistance. The Duke hesitated briefly before accepting the delicate chain from her fingers. Leora gathered her hair aside, exposing her neck as he moved behind her. His proximity sent unexpected warmth cascading across her skin, his breath a gentle disturbance against her nape as he secured the clasp with careful precision. "There," he murmured, his voice pitched lower than usual. "Now you carry Veramond legacy against your heart." When Leora turned to face him, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, of evolving sentiment neither had anticipated when signing marriage documents months earlier. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility, until a distant bell broke the spell. "The tenants assemble," he observed, stepping back with ingrained propriety. "Shall we greet them together, Duchess?" "With pleasure," she replied, the sapphires cool against her skin beneath high-necked morning dress, invisible to all save herself and the man who had placed them there with unexpected tenderness. They descended to the entrance hall where servants had gathered in formal receiving line, an old custom apparently revived for the occasion. Mrs. Holloway stepped forward, presenting the Duke with an ornate wooden box inlaid with silver. "The festival key, Your Grace, as tradition requires." He accepted it with grave courtesy, then turned to Leora with formal bow. "Would you do us the honor, Duchess?" Recognizing ceremonial significance despite unfamiliarity with the specific ritual, Leora accepted the box, opening it to discover an ancient iron key nestled upon velvet cushion. The assembled staff watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to approval, witnesses to Ironhall's gradual resurrection from half-decade dormancy. Together they processed through gardens now resplendent with summer bloom, following a path that led beyond formal boundaries to the great meadow where colorful tents had been erected and long tables arranged beneath ancient oak trees. As they approached, the gathered crowd, several hundred strong from elderly pensioners to infants in arms, fell silent, then erupted in spontaneous cheer. The Duke guided Leora toward a stone archway, standing alone in the meadow's center, clearly ancient, its purpose mysterious, until he gestured toward an iron lock embedded within the right pillar. Understanding dawned as she inserted the ceremonial key, turning it with satisfying click that released hidden mechanisms within the stonework. From apertures near the arch's crown, water suddenly flowed, clear streams that cascaded down channels carved within the pillars to disappear beneath the meadow's surface. The crowd's approval redoubled at this symbolic unlocking, children darting forward to splash hands through the flowing water with evident delight. "The Veramond Springs," the Duke explained, his voice carrying unusual animation. "Legend claims they run from sacred source beneath Ironhall itself. Unlocking them officially begins summer festival, and traditionally ensures fertile harvest. The ceremony complete, formality gradually yielded to celebration. Local musicians struck up lively country tunes, children organized impromptu races across the meadow, and estate workers approached the Duke and Duchess with respectful yet genuine welcome, many introducing family members with evident pride. Leora found herself unexpectedly moved by their acceptance, their willingness to embrace her as legitimate mistress of Ironhall, despite her non-aristocratic origins. The Duke remained close at her side throughout, his customary reserve mellowing into something approaching relaxed engagement as he discussed crop rotations with farmers, building repairs with tenants, and educational opportunities with local schoolmaster. "But you know them all by name," Leora observed during momentary respite beneath oak tree shade, genuinely impressed by his detailed knowledge of individual circumstances. "They are Ironhall's true foundation," he replied simply. "Their welfare determines the estate's prosperity more surely than any London investment." This philosophy, aristocratic responsibility rather than mere privilege, revealed yet another dimension to the complex man she had married. Not cold, calculating noble but conscientious steward of ancient trust, extending beyond physical property to human lives dependent upon his decisions. The day progressed with rustic games, shared meals at long trestle tables, and traditional dances performed by village maidens crowned with summer flowers. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, bonfires were lit across the meadow, their smoke fragrant with herbs and greenwood. During brief separation, while the Duke consulted with his land agent regarding drainage concerns, Leora found herself approached by Mrs. Hodges, the elderly gardener's wife, a dignified woman whose position as unofficial village matriarch was evident in others' deference. "Begging your Grace's pardon," the older woman began with formal curtsy softened by genuine warmth, "but I wish to express the tenant's gratitude." "For the festival? I believe credit belongs entirely to His Grace," Leora replied with honest modesty. Mrs. Hodges smiled, weather-beaten face crinkling with evident wisdom. "For the Duke's return to himself, Your Grace. These 5 years we've watched him withdraw behind Ironhall's walls, a living ghost among memories." Her gnarled hand briefly touched Leora's sleeve with maternal familiarity. "Now, he walks among us again, sees beyond his grief to those who depend upon his care. That transformation arrives with you, Duchess, whatever modesty prevents acknowledgement." Before Leora could formulate response to this unexpectedly direct observation, the Duke himself returned, bowing respectfully to the older woman. "Mrs. Hodges, I trust you're not overwhelming Her Grace with village gossip, merely expressing gratitude where due, Your Grace," she replied with serene dignity, curtsying once more before returning to her husband's side near the central bonfire. As twilight descended, transforming meadow celebration into something more primitive and magical, the Duke guided Leora toward the stone arch once more. Water continued flowing from its crown, catching final sunlight in diamond brilliance. "Are you overwearied?" he inquired with genuine concern. "These gatherings can prove taxing even for those accustomed to their enthusiasm." "Not at all," she assured him truthfully. "I find it all rather wonderful, this connection between great house and surrounding community, like watching blood flow through living organism rather than separate, disconnected entities." He regarded her with that increasingly familiar expression, surprise yielding to thoughtful reassessment, as though continually discovering unexpected depths beneath her quiet exterior. "You perceive what many born to privilege never comprehend," he observed. "The reciprocal nature of noblesse oblige, not merely duty flowing downward, but sustenance flowing upward." Musicians struck up more intimate melody as darkness gathered, couples forming for traditional country dance around the central bonfire. The Duke hesitated, then extended his hand with formal courtesy underscored by genuine invitation. "Would you honor me, Duchess?" The unexpected request, their first public dance since the restrained wedding ceremony, caused Leora's pulse to quicken. She placed her fingers against his palm, feeling the sapphire necklace shift against her skin beneath her gown as he led her toward the firelit circle. Though structured by ancient patterns, the dance contained less rigid formality than ballroom equivalents, allowing brief moments of physical proximity as couples turned beneath upraised arms or circled back to back before separating again. Each fleeting contact, his hand at her waist, her shoulder brushing his chest, carried heightened awareness unlike their previous controlled interactions. As the melody built toward conclusion, pairs moved closer to the bonfire's warmth, the final movement requiring each man to lift his partner in brief symbolic elevation before returning her safely to earth. The Duke's hands encircled Leora's waist with careful strength, raising her momentarily against firelight before setting her gently upon the grass once more. For one suspended moment, their customary distance collapsed entirely, her hands upon his shoulders, his at her waist, their faces illuminated by golden flames that reflected in his eyes with unprecedented warmth. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition of boundary crossed, not through physical passion but mutual choice to move beyond initial arrangement toward genuine partnership. The moment broke as musicians concluded their tune, couples separating into formal acknowledgement as village tradition dictated. Yet something had shifted irrevocably, transition marked by neither document nor declaration, but simple country dance beneath midsummer stars. Later, as they walked back toward Ironhall through gardens silvered by rising moon, the Duke maintained comfortable silence, his hand occasionally brushing hers with deliberate yet undemanding contact. When they reached the terrace, he paused, gazing upward at constellation patterns visible through gathering summer mist. "I had forgotten," he said finally, his voice unusually reflective, "how tradition anchors us to something larger than individual experience, how ritual bridges isolation, even when performed through hollow obligation." Leora considered his words, understanding their deeper implication. And now, was today's revival mere obligation? He turned toward her, moonlight illuminating features softened beyond aristocratic mask. "No, Duchess, today contained genuine joy, an emotion I had not expected to encounter again in this lifetime." The simple acknowledgement, admission of emotional resurrection previously deemed impossible, affected Leora profoundly. Without conscious thought, her hand rose to touch the hidden sapphires beneath her bodice, symbol of tradition renewed and future reclaimed from grief's dominion. "I am glad," she whispered, the inadequate words somehow sufficient between them. For a breathtaking moment, she thought he might bridge the final distance between them, might transform their evolving companionship into physical expression beneath moon-silvered sky. Instead, he offered his arm with formal courtesy, underlaid by newfound warmth. "Shall we retire? Tomorrow brings routine's return after today's festivities." As they crossed the threshold together, no longer duke and purchased bride, but partners in gradual rediscovery, Leora sensed that another threshold awaited crossing, when right moment arrived through mutual readiness rather than external expectation. The wedding night that had changed them both continued its transformative work, not through passion's consummation, but patient reconstruction of hearts damaged by different circumstances, yet equally in need of healing. Above Ironhall, summer stars wheeled in ancient patterns marking time's passage and season's inevitable renewal. Autumn painted Ironhall's extensive grounds with russet and gold, transforming summer's verdant splendor into more mature magnificence. 5 months had passed since Leora's arrival as reluctant bride, her position evolving beyond all initial expectation, from transaction to treasured companion. October winds scattered fallen leaves across formal gardens, now being prepared for winter dormancy, while within the great house, fires blazed in grates long cold before her coming. Leora stood in the music room, sunlight slanting through tall windows to illuminate the pianoforte where she had just concluded practice. Her fingers lingered on ivory keys, the final notes of Chopin's Nocturne fading into afternoon stillness. The piece had been Georgiana's favorite, according to the Duke's casual mention weeks earlier, information offered without painful constraint, merely historical context for musical selection. Gradual healing had continued through summer's golden days, and now into autumn's mature splendor. The Duke, Thalen as she now called him in private moments, had undergone transformation as profound as Ironhall's seasonal metamorphosis. His rigid reserve had yielded to measured warmth, his isolated grief to cautious re-engagement with both household and community. Their relationship had likewise evolved through subtle daily accumulations, shared meals, evening readings, garden walks, musical duets and occasional brushes of hand against hand, each contact less hesitant than the last. Physical intimacy remained unconsummated, though increasing comfort with casual proximity suggested evolving possibilities rather than permanent restraint. They occupied separate chambers still, connected by a door now frequently left ajar rather than formally locked. A discreet knock interrupted Leora's reflections. Mrs. Holloway entered, her dignified countenance bearing unusual animation. "Begging your Grace's pardon, but the memorial garden nears completion. His Grace requested your presence when convenient." Leora rose immediately. The garden dedicated to Georgiana and James had progressed throughout summer months, gradually transforming from architectural drawings to physical reality beyond the East Wing. Though she had observed its creation from respectful distance, Thalen had increasingly included her in decisions regarding plantings and layout, acknowledging her developing horticultural knowledge gained through regular consultations with Mr. Hodges. Wrapping a woolen shawl, not the original blue one, now carefully preserved in her drawer but a similar garment in autumn russet, around her shoulders, Leora followed the housekeeper through corridors now familiar rather than forbidding. Servants they passed offered respectful acknowledgement without the wary assessment that had characterized her early days at Ironhall. She had become, through gradual integration, legitimate mistress of the great house, not through aristocratic birthright, but demonstrated care for both property and people dependent upon it. Outside, October sunlight cast long shadows across formal gardens now yielding to seasonal decline, though carefully tended by gardeners preparing bulbs and roots for spring renewal. Leora followed a gravelled path curving around the east wing toward the Memorial Garden's secluded location, a sheltered vale protected from prevailing winds while capturing maximum sunlight for delicate plantings. As she rounded the final curve, the garden revealed itself completely for the first time since construction began, a beautifully realized sanctuary combining formal structure with natural grace. Stone pathways wound between carefully planned beds, where late roses still bloomed alongside chrysanthemums and asters. At the garden's center stood a simple marble bench positioned before an ornamental pool fed by discreet fountain. The Duke awaited there, tall figure silhouetted against autumn foliage as he supervised workmen positioning the final cornerstone beneath a rowan tree already displaying brilliant red berries. Upon noticing her approach, he dismissed the laborers with courteous acknowledgement, then turned toward her with that increasingly familiar expression, pleasure untainted by guilt or reservation. "Duchess," he greeted, extending his hand in welcome. "I hoped you might witness the completion." Leora accepted his hand, their fingers intertwining with comfortable familiarity as they stood together surveying the tranquil space. "It's beautiful," she observed sincerely. "Peaceful without morbidity, commemorative without oppression. Precisely my intention," he agreed, guiding her toward the central bench where they sat side by side, shoulders nearly touching, a space for remembrance, yet oriented toward life's continuation rather than its conclusion. The distinction seemed profoundly significant, evidence of healing, neither erasing past attachment nor preventing future connection. They sat in comfortable silence as afternoon light gilded autumn foliage surrounding the secluded garden, distant sounds of estate activity, providing subtle reminder of life continuing beyond grief's sacred boundaries. "The pocket watch and book?" Leora inquired gently, referencing the personal items intended for cornerstone interment. "Placed beneath the marble this morning, with appropriate words spoken." His voice remained steady, grief present, but no longer overwhelming. The vicar attended, though ceremony remained private. She nodded understanding, respecting his choice to maintain certain observances within personal rather than shared experience. Their partnership had developed such boundaries, territories reserved for individual processing, alongside expanding regions of mutual engagement. "I've been thinking," the Duke began after contemplative pause, his gaze focused on Fountain's gentle movement, "about time's curious nature, how it simultaneously preserves and transforms, maintains memory, while facilitating change." "A philosophical turn for an autumn afternoon," Leora observed with gentle warmth. "Perhaps." His smile, once rare, now increasingly frequent, briefly illuminated his features, yet relevant to matters requiring discussion between us. Something in his tone, careful deliberation underlaid with uncharacteristic uncertainty, caused Leora's pulse to quicken. What matters would those be? He turned slightly toward her, autumn sunlight highlighting silver strands among darker hair at his temples. "Our marriage has evolved considerably from its contractual beginnings." "Indeed," she acknowledged softly, uncertain where this observation led, yet conscious of heightened significance. "When you arrived at Ironhall, I offered choice regarding physical aspects of our arrangement." His composure remained intact, though color touched his cheekbones above precise cravat. That suspension of expectation seemed appropriate, given circumstances of our union. Leora maintained equal composure, though her heart accelerated beneath wool and muslin. "Your consideration was unexpected and deeply appreciated. Yet now," he paused, selecting words with characteristic precision, Now circumstances have altered substantially. We have established companionship I neither anticipated nor believed possible after previous loss. The admission, direct acknowledgement of emotional evolution beyond mere arrangement, created warm expansion beneath Leora's ribs. Still, she waited, allowing him necessary space to complete his carefully constructed thoughts. I find myself, he hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I find myself contemplating possibilities beyond our current parameters. Understanding dawned, bringing neither embarrassment nor apprehension but warm anticipation. Possibilities involving the door between our chambers? Relief crossed his features at her direct yet gentle response. Yes, though not through obligation or expectation, but mutual inclination, if such exists on both sides. The qualification, his continued insistence upon her autonomous choice rather than wifely duty, demonstrated how thoroughly their relationship had transcended conventional marriage despite formal beginnings. Leora considered her response carefully, knowing its significance extended beyond mere physical arrangement to deeper emotional terrain. I believe, she began softly, gaze steady upon his face, that inclination has developed gradually alongside deeper understanding. What began as transaction has become something else entirely, and that something else might include. He left the question deliberately incomplete, offering space for her uncoerced response. Complete union, she finished simply, at time of mutual choosing rather than social dictation. The tension in his shoulders visibly eased, relief at confirmation of shared sentiment rather than solitary evolution. His hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining with deliberate significance. Perhaps tonight, he suggested quietly, we might dine privately in my chambers rather than the formal dining room. Share conversation without servants' constant attendance. The invitation, discreetly phrased yet unmistakable in intent, represented the final threshold their gradual evolution had been approaching through months of patient discovery. Leora met his gaze directly, her response equally measured, yet unambiguous. I should like that very much. As afternoon light deepened toward evening, they remained on the Memorial Gardens bench, hands linked in silent acknowledgement of transition, imminent yet unhurried. Around them, autumn's mature beauty displayed nature's capacity for both commemoration and renewal, fallen leaves nourishing soil for future growth, present decline enabling spring's eventual resurrection. When they finally rose to return to the house, the Duke Thalen retained her hand within his, their steps aligned in unforced synchronicity along paths once traversed, as separate entities now united through conscious choice rather than mere arrangement. Within Ironhall's ancient walls, preparations for evening commenced. Fires stoked against autumn chill, lamps illuminated against gathering dusk, chambers readied for night's approach. Yet beyond conventional routine lay unprecedented territory, the wedding night postponed through mutual consent, now voluntarily embraced through developed trust. I have something for you, Thalen said as they reached the entrance hall, withdrawing a small volume from his pocket. A collection of Wordsworth's poetry she recognized as the same edition whose marginalia had first revealed glimpses of his inner thoughts. Your personal copy, she inquired, accepting it with careful hands. The very same. He indicated a ribbon marker placed between specific pages, with particular passage selected for your consideration. Later, in her chamber while preparing for evening's private dinner, Leora opened the volume to the marked page, discovering lines underscored with precise pencil stroke. True beauty dwells in deep retreats, whose veil is unremoved, till heart with heart in concord beats, and the lover is beloved. The sentiment, simple yet profound recognition of genuine connection, developing beyond surface arrangement, captured perfectly their gradual evolution from contractual partners to chosen companions. That he would express through borrowed verse what direct declaration might render overly sentimental, demonstrated continuing respect for her intelligence alongside growing emotional engagement. As twilight deepened into evening proper, Leora selected a gown of deep blue silk, neither formal dinner dress nor intimate negligee, but elegant compromise appropriate for significant transition. Agnes arranged her hair in simple style, secured with silver combs rather than elaborate pins requiring assistance for removal. The adjoining door between their chambers, physical symbol of separation maintained through mutual respect, stood partially ajar, lamplight from his rooms casting golden rectangle across her floor. Taking final breath for courage, Leora moved toward this threshold, neither hesitant nor hurried but deliberate in conscious choice. What awaited beyond mere physical union was partnership founded upon accumulated understanding, the gradual revelation of separate souls choosing connection beyond social convention or financial arrangement. What had begun as transaction, young bride given to older duke through necessity rather than inclination, had transformed through patient discovery into relationship valuing separate personhood within shared endeavor. The wedding night that had changed them both completed its quiet revolution, not through immediate passion but gradual restoration. Hearts damaged by different circumstances, finding unexpected healing through mutual respect, evolved into genuine affection. As Leora stepped across the final threshold, autumn wind scattered leaves across Ironhall's ancient stones, while within, two souls previously isolated found warmth against approaching winter, not through desperate grasping but conscious choice to move from solitary endurance into shared experience. The door closed softly behind her, not as barrier, but as boundary crossed through mutual desire rather than external expectation. Beyond it, future awaited, uncertain yet promising, composed of ordinary days illuminated by extraordinary understanding that true connection develops not through dramatic declaration, but patient discovery of another's essential worth. And so the story that began with reluctant bride and grieving duke concluded not with conventional romance, but something rarer. Partnership founded upon genuine recognition, transcending social position and circumstance, choice made freely after knowledge rather than before, and love growing not from passion's immediate flame, but steady warmth of accumulated respect. Outside, autumn stars wheeled in ancient patterns above Ironhall's venerable walls, marking another season's passage toward inevitable renewal. Within, two hearts found synchronicity through consciously chosen rhythm rather than externally imposed cadence, and that perhaps made all the difference. In a world that celebrates instant gratification and passionate beginnings, this tale reminds us that true love often grows not from dramatic first encounters, but through the patient cultivation of mutual respect. The Duke and Leora teach us that our most profound connections can emerge from unexpected circumstances when we allow others the freedom to reveal themselves at their own pace, and when we listen with our hearts as well as our ears. Their journey shows us that healing often requires gentle presence rather than forceful intervention. Just as Ironhall's gardens needed careful tending to bloom again after years of neglect, wounded hearts require patience and understanding to open themselves to new possibilities. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that true nobility lies not in titles or possessions, but in how we honor another's autonomy. The Duke's greatest gift to Leora was not wealth or status, but the freedom to choose her own path, even if that path might lead away from him. In doing so, he created the very conditions that allowed genuine love to flourish between them. May we all find the wisdom to recognize that relationships built on patience, respect, and genuine choice create foundations strong enough to weather any storm that life may bring. If this tale of patient love and quiet transformation touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the deeper currents of human connection. Comment below to share how this journey of two souls finding each other through respect rather than passion resonated with you. What moments between the Duke and Leora moved you most? Your thoughts help us create more stories that speak to the heart's truest longings.